Every great power spins the same fairy tale for its subjects: your money is secure. Every government insists with absolute conviction that its promises are an unshakable fortress. Yet, as the gears of history grind forward, these claims are proven to be hollow echoes time and time again. From the marble pillars of ancient Rome to the blood-stained streets of revolutionary France, from the desperate battlefields of the American Civil War to the modern-day bank lines in Lebanon, the script never changes. People wake up to find that a lifetime of labor has been reduced to worthless paper, discovering too late that the systems they trusted were merely castles built on sand. You must accept this reality. Financial collapses are not rare exceptions. They are the iron rule of history. The real question is not whether the system will fracture, but where you will be standing when the inevitable cracks appear. The most fatal mistake in the world of finance is falling for the illusion of permanence. We glance at the digits on our screens or the paper in our wallets and assume they are as solid as bedrock. In truth, money is not a foundation. It is a fragile tether of trust. And as we have seen, trust can turn to ash in a single night. This is why history is as much a brutal judge as it is a vital guide. As every system sinks, it leaves behind a map. It whispers what constitutes true value and what was merely a cloud of dust. If you look closely, you will see that the survivors of these cataclysms were not those most loyal to the system, but those who were the first to doubt it. The Byzantine Empire serves as a flawless case study. We often remember them as the resilient remnant of Rome that kept the lights burning for a millennium after the West had faded. At the heart of this massive economy pulsed a gold coin known as the solidus. It was so dependable that merchants from the Middle East to the furthest reaches of Asia accepted it without hesitation. For centuries it reigned as the world's first true global reserve currency. But here is the lesson-laden turning point. You might assume the Byzantines learned from Rome's earlier disaster with the silver denarius. Recall how Roman emperors debased the silver content so aggressively that the coins eventually became nothing more than cheap tin with a thin silver wash. Unfortunately, Byzantium walked into the exact same trap. They began to compromise the purity of the gold, stretching it thinner and mixing in base metals. At first the public was blind to the change, but once trust fractured, the game was over. The coin that had been the anchor of Mediterranean trade became a mere political fiction. This corruption killed credibility, and with it, the pillars of the Byzantine economy collapsed. What survived the storm? Not government decrees or paper oaths. It was the merchants who had quietly hoarded physical gold or land beyond the emperor's reach. Our first lesson is clear. Governments cannot resist the urge to dilute their currency. When they do, real value always flees toward assets that cannot be counterfeited. Sometimes the catalyst for collapse isn't a ruler tinkering with coins, but an external sudden strike. In the mid-14th century, Europe was rocked by its darkest nightmare, the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, half the population vanished. Cities were hollowed out, and trade routes were erased from the map. Yet the economic side of this tragedy was more complex than it seemed. When the workforce was cut in half, the labor of the survivors suddenly became priceless. Workers began demanding wages that were previously unimaginable. On the other hand, land and food, once scarce and expensive, became abundant relative to the fewer people remaining. Families with silver, tangible goods, or simply the strength to work gained immense bargaining power. Estates once worth a fortune changed hands for a pittance. If this sounds familiar, you're not mistaken. We witnessed a modern echo during the COVID pandemic. Supply chains snapped, governments printed trillions to keep the engine from seizing, and a massive wave of inequality followed. Those with liquidity saw their wealth multiply, while those living paycheck to paycheck were left behind. History whispers, pandemics redistribute wealth. The survivors of the Black Death climbed the social ladder. The survivors of COVID used liquidity to sweep up assets that were slipping from others' hands. Crises always reward the prepared. Renaissance Florence taught us that the grandeur of an institution is no guarantee of its safety. In the 1340s, Florence was the financial capital of the world, home to Titan banking dynasties like the Bardi and the Peruzzi. These houses extended massive credit to kings, their ultimate mistake. Lending to King Edward III of England for his endless wars. When Edward declared he could not pay his debts, those indestructible banks didn't just stumble, they disintegrated. The citizens who had placed their savings in these safe harbors were ruined. Ordinary Florentines learned the hard way that size does not equal security. The concept of too big to fail is the oldest lie in finance. Institutions exist for profit, not for your protection. When they fall, they will drag your life savings down with them. This cycle repeats in every century, from 2008's Lehman Brothers to 2019's Lebanese banking crisis. The American Civil War was fought not only on battlefields, but through a ruthless financial war. Both the North and the South discovered that the only way to fund a war of that scale was through the printing press. In the North, greenbacks were issued, paper notes not backed by gold. While initially a patriotic move, the more currency that flooded the market, the more its purchasing power eroded. In the South, the Confederacy, the situation was an absolute catastrophe. Starved for resources, the Confederacy printed graybacks uncontrollably. By the war's end, inflation was measured in the thousands. A soldier's paycheck would lose its value before he could even reach the bakery. By 1865, Confederate currency wasn't just weak, it was dead. In that wreckage, the only things that held firm were hard assets, land, food, and gold. For the average person, it was total ruin, but for those with access to tangible goods, it was an opportunity to seize property. We must never forget that even our own soil has witnessed a total currency collapse. Protection did not come from the paper in the wallet, but from holding value that inflation could not touch. France proved that a revolution can destroy money even faster than a war. In the 1790s, revolutionaries seized church lands and issued a new currency called the assignat. Theoretically, these notes were backed by the value of those lands. However, the government refused to stop the presses. Every new batch of notes cannibalized the value of the last. Prices spiraled out of control. Bakers refused to sell bread for paper. Eventually, the revolution devoured its own children. Those who won this collapse were not the holders of patriotic paper, but those who held food, gold, or property. When trust snaps, your savings don't just shrink, they evaporate. The 1997 Asian financial crisis proved how debt can be turned into a weapon in the modern world. Thailand had borrowed mountainously in US dollars, overconfident that their currency peg would hold. When that tether broke, their debts became unpayable overnight. Investors fled, and regional economies fell like dominoes. The ones who suffered were not the speculators, but the ordinary citizens whose savings melted away and whose jobs vanished. The pattern remained identical. Those who held assets abroad or in different currencies survived. Those who trusted the local system paid a heavy price. Borrowing in someone else's currency is an invitation to be capsized in the first storm. From the French Revolution to modern Asia, the themes remain constant. Paper money eventually fails, debt becomes a shackle, and the survivors are never the most faithful. They are the ones who saw the cracks coming. This isn't just a story for history books. Between 2019 and 2021, banks in Lebanon literally locked their doors. People woke up to find they couldn't touch their own money. The Lebanese pound lost 90% of its value. Doctors, engineers, and retirees, anyone who trusted the system, lost everything. Your bank account is not a treasure chest. It is a loan you gave to an institution. In a crisis, that institution may decide not to pay you back. The 2008 foreclosures and the 2023 regional bank failures in the U.S. all whisper the same thing: the too big to fail. Fairy tale is only told until the doors slam shut, so how do you defend yourself? History offers no single magic bullet, but it provides clues. In Byzantium it was gold. After the Black Death it was liquidity. In Florence it was keeping distance from the big banks. The details change, but the core remains. Trust tangible assets, not paper promises. Collapse is both a tragedy and an opening. For the unprepared, it is ruin. But for those with resilience and assets that cannot be printed, it is the moment of rebuilding. Wealth is not just what you own, it is what you can do. The true survivors were those who could produce value when everyone else was paralyzed. The baker who could still make bread, the smith who could fix tools, the farmer who could feed the community. In a crisis, money loses its meaning, but production never does. Ultimately, protection is not a blind faith that the government or the banks will rescue you. Protection is a blend of hard assets, real skills, and the unwavering awareness that all illusions eventually end. History doesn't always repeat, but it never fails to crush those who ignore it. If you want to understand how financial history repeats itself, subscribe and join our journey.